Today I'm joined by Mark Stern of Capital Hoops and also David Dickerson of HOOPKIDZ for an all-Met prediction show in which we'll run down the top 10 players possibly for first team all-Met and also the player of the year and also the coach of the year in the Washington, D.C. area. Thank you for joining me, fellas.
Thanks for having us, sir.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
No problem. So let's get started. Let's go with everyone's favorite conference. Let's start with the WCAC. Do you guys have any unanimous choices out of that conference?
I think I do, and I'm going to correct you out of the box, G. That's not Mark's favorite conference. Mark is strictly a Montgomery County guy.
Okay, got it.
But
I also correct one thing real quick. When you said we're going to make the all-Met predictions, like we're not predicting what they are going to select. We're making our own selections, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
This is distinctively an all-Met production because if we were to try to figure out who the Washington Post in particular was going to predict, we would be dead wrong.
Wow.
Well, I'm not going to say dead wrong, but their selection process is not necessarily an all-inclusive one, and so it's just different. They don't have like there's not certain parameters or whatever. So G, you have an opportunity to set your own here.
So with that said, do you think we'll be at least 80% correct?
Yeah, we'll be pretty close.
Okay, got it. So who wants to take the floor first and speak on the WCAC player?
Well, we're going to run through the WCAC first. I'm going to the first person's name I'm going to throw out there is Terrence Williams of Gonzaga. Terrence has had a tremendous career at Gonzaga, 4 years. Starter, really put season on top of season each year. Got better with his individual skill set. He's a bit of a tweener, but he's played literally 4 positions for Coach Turner. So he's the name I put in first.
Okay, I did not have Terrence Williams on my list. Stern, did you have Williams?
I did.
Okay.
He's on the bubble, and there's a couple WCAC kids who are on the bubble. We can probably get into this a little bit later, but there's a few WCAC kids who are on the bubble. But I do have Terrence on my list.
Okay, so what we'll do is, because I didn't have him, we'll come back to him because both of you right now are voting him on. So 2-1, he's on so far. So who do you have next, Stern?
Dickinson.
Yeah, I also have Hunter Dickinson.
Okay, I had Hunter as well, WCAC Player of the Year. So that's a unanimous selection.
Okay, I'm going to say with Hunter too that the Hunter's senior year I think really cemented him. Because they started off slow. Again, another 4-year guy, 3-year starter. Did not different parts of his career he didn't dominate. This year, particularly second half of the season, I thought Hunter dominated. He was dictating things on both ends of the floor. And I don't think we saw that consistently from him until this year, but he's had a great year.
I agree. He did show his dominance. He had a 40-point game against St. John's, which I think really kind of cemented him for the WCAC Player of the Year. Stern, you also had Hunter Dickinson as well, right?
I did. I think. He started off the season slow. I think Timberlake was dominant at the beginning of the year. And then it kind of coincided with Dickinson's commitment when things kind of, he went up a couple ladders. But, the last 2/3 of the season, he was. I mean, if we were voting on All Met Player of the Year and it was just based on like post January 5th, I think he would be a unanimous selection for that too. But he had a great year, but a slow start.
Got it. So who's next? Who do you have next?
Yeah, we'll stay right in Hyattsville with Earl Timberlake.
Yeah, I had Earl as well. Mm-hmm.
Yep, I had him.
Stern.
Yep.
Yeah, so with him, I think that his defensive presence, his ability to do multiple things, his versatility, I think Hunter, might be the most outstanding player on that particular team, but I think that Earl is probably the most valuable player on that team. That's just my opinion, though.
Well, I, have been watching Earl since middle school, and seventh grade, probably to be more exact. He hasn't been one of the kids that I've worked with, but I have seen, him make leaps and bounds as a player. First of all, between last year and this year, I'd say, and Mark, you could probably attest to this, seeing him almost on a daily basis, is that we got a bigger, stronger Earl Timberlake. He literally grew, and then spent a lot of time in the gym. He was always a physical presence, but there were the first two sessions, for example, last spring of EYBL. He was absolutely dominant, and this is on a national basis. And so he's picked up on those. He picked up on those things this year, and in fact, without Earl, because if you saw the math early on, you would have thought it was a wash. If you saw the couple games out, you would think, okay, this is not going to be good. But Earl ended up spending a lot of time as the point guard and the lead guard, as well as doing, checking tough players on the other side and being a defensive presence and rebounding. He really had to do a lot this year because they didn't have an experienced backcourt. My hat's off to him. He put together a good year. He's undeniable as an all-better.
And Stern, you have him as well?
I do. I certainly do.
So he's unanimous as well.
Yep.
All right, Stern, you want to go with the next one, or did you want to chime in on Timberlake?
I mean, I think everything you guys said is accurate. I think Timberlake. I think he's got the best odds of being an NBA player in the DMV right now, to be honest. Maybe even over Roach. I think his body, his tenacity, his hunger, his fire, like he's got all the attributes that are necessary. In addition to his skill set.
Still, for me, the pro aspect still early, because there's certain things he's just gonna have to do between now and then to separate himself. But he does have the physicality right now.
Mr. Dickerson, did you want to go next?
Sure. We'll go uptown in the WCAC up to Military Road to St. John's with Ishmael Leggett.
Okay. I did not have Ish on my list. Did you have Ish, Stern?
Nope.
Okay. And Mr. Dickerson, did you want to give your thought process behind Leggett's selection?
Yeah, very consistently for 4 years, got better. Big play kid. When the games were big, especially this year, he had to be big, and he played big. In the past, there were a lot of other people at St. John's over the last couple of years where he didn't have to be that guy, but this year he had to be. I just think that Ish put it all together this year. I thought that he was a problem for anybody who had to play against him. So he made me a fan with just showing up, and there were, St. John's was, again, they were they'd lost a few people from last year, weren't as experienced as they've been in the past, and I thought he just played great.
Okay, well, so he didn't make my list because of they started off really hot out of conference. Then they kind of got in conference, and that's where the majority of their losses came. Had a loss against an unranked Carroll team. I think he split with DeMatha. I think
No, they lost both. They lost both to DeMatha.
Oh, I'm sorry, not DeMatha. I meant Gonzaga. He split with Gonzaga, lost both to DeMatha. And did they also lose both the PVI, right?
I believe so.
I think they lost both the PVI.
That I'm not sure about, yeah. But go ahead.
When we talk about those top tier teams, at this particular point, St. John's wasn't able to get it done. But I had a question for you, Mr. Dickerson, just going back. When you give your analysis of the player, you always talk about their development over the 4 years. And I understand that, but do you think that should factor into their selection into the All-Met process, or should it just be this one particular year in which the production in this year?
Well, where it's important for me is looking at where the kid started at, where the kid was at. We're also talking. Here's the thing you got to remember, G, and Mark, you're very aware of this. We're talking the WCAC. I mean, you can be Iverton can get you, St. Mary's Riken can get you. You mentioned them starting out hot outside the season and then losing to Carroll. Well, guess what? That happens in the WCAC. This is what that league is about. There's as you know, there's excellent coaching throughout the league. The schools are very aggressive about going and getting the best kids from the area into their schools. That's what that league is. It's not a cupcake league. It's not for the faint of heart. You can lose. Gonzaga can drop 2 games to DeMatha and then turn around and win. Over at American University, over at Gallaudet. I mean, that's what normally happens. That's a 4-decade thing here that's been going on. So I don't really count the WCAC losses against them unless you just see that the team is completely fading. They've lost 5 in a row or 6 in a row, and but no, I'm not going to count those things against them. And still, most of the year they were a nationally ranked school.
All right, so let me just ask you this: do you count national games in your selection of players as well? So if a player he plays on a team with a national schedule, does that factor into your selection as well?
Well, the teams we're talking about right now pretty much all have national schedules,
right? Except
for a couple of the teams in that league, and they actually still play, out of town and in very good situations. So I would what I would more count. And I don't know how you feel about this, Mark, because I'd count the kids' performance against those national teams.
Well, so for me, this is a resume of the kid's year in question. I don't think his prior years matter for all Met selections. Now, if it comes down to like a dead heat tie between 2 guys, maybe you'll look at what they've done in the past or how they've progressed from year to year or what have you. But when I sit down and try to make these selections, I try to look at what has this kid done in his senior year or in his whatever the current year is.
Sure.
What is his resume for that year?
That's absolutely a great point. The point I just wanted to make to G is that sometimes, because we're talking WCAC right now, sometimes we're talking about a kid that's in a program with 8 other Division I kids. And if you've watched him over the 4 years, you'll know that he was not the man his freshman and sophomore and possibly even his junior year, when they've had other players. And so that's why the progress for me is how do they handle when they're in a position to take over,
right,
or to be dominant, how they handle that. So those are the things I mentioned in terms of development. Obviously, the most important thing is how they performed this year.
Right.
But if we were, go ahead.
I was going to chime in on Leggett real quick if I can.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I just want to say is people catch a lot of flack on Twitter, at the barbershop, wherever, when they make their all Met selections. Like, how do you not have Leggett as one of your all Mets? Or how do you not have a kid from this conference as one of your all Mets? But, when you're at the barbershop or on Twitter, you can just blindly say that. When you're doing this, you only have 10 people. You can't just say, yeah, he should be a first team all Met. Yeah, he should be a first team all Met. Like, if he's a first team all Met, that means that someone else is not a first team all Met. And it becomes very difficult when you narrow this list. A couple hours yesterday going from, guy to guy to guy. And like, for me, the WCAC is never going to have 6 guys on this list ever. And if they can only have 5, Leggett's not going to be on it. He's the 6th guy for me. So it just becomes increasingly difficult when you really sit there and you have to decide not only who's in, but who's out. And like, I want people, when they criticize this and say X should be on this team, like, that means you need to take someone off of this team. And
I agree with you that it should be based upon this particular season. We respect every player. Every player that's being mentioned is a great player. It doesn't impact his legacy or his career, but we're just speaking on this particular season because, like you said, we only have 10 spots. So, and the way I look at it, I look at winning, I look at production, and I look at impact.
Yep.
In this particular year. So if your team is not necessarily, if it hasn't won the conference, it didn't win the championship, your stats aren't incredibly through the roof, and let's say your impact could be negated based upon who you were playing on whichever night, I don't know if that person should make the list. So that's just how I look at it.
No, and I'm fine with that, because that's, it ends up being a matter of opinion. The bigger point you made was that all the kids that we've discussed so far are great players. These are all
absolutely
kids, and our problem here in the DMV, it's a problem that no one else really has except for maybe Chicago, is that we're spoiled. We see high level. We're watching when we go to these WCAC games, and Mark, when you're covering these WCAC games out there with your camera, you are watching division basketball. Certainly at the A10 level, at the CAA level, you are watching Division I basketball. This is what we see all the time. We are spoiled.
No question. No question.
We go to other areas, man, and you don't see even a percentage of the high level of play that we do. And so when we're talking about some of these kids, we still have to remember that they're 16, 17, and 18-year-old kids too. And in many places, they're just not as nearly developed as our kids are here. So I'll throw that in. All right, so we can move on.
No problem. So right now we have Terrence Williams, Hunter Dickerson, and Earl Timberlake. Ishmael Leggett was mentioned, so that's 4 from the WCAC so far. Stern, I think it's on you. Do you have another WCAC
pick? I got 2
more.
Keels.
Okay.
Yeah, Trevor Keels.
Keels.
I have him as well.
So Stern, you picked Trevor Keels. I would like for you kind of to go into your thought process behind that, because he didn't make my list. I picked Jeremy Roach, and the reason being their stats were so really close, and if you watched a lot of those games or if you saw a lot of that production, they were very, very close. So I just wanted to know how did you come up with Keels?
I came up with both of them. So I didn't pick Keels over Roach. I picked both of them. I thought Keels was point blank one of the 10 best players in the area this year. I thought what he did in a night in, night out basis, not only on the offensive end, but this guy, like, he's guarding Hunter Dickinson in crunch time every time they play DeMatha. He's guarding the center on every team. When Avery Ford transferred away from PVI and Tyler Coleman and Jensen, you can't really have them in the game at the end of the game because their offensive, game doesn't stack up with everyone else. That's going to transfer Keels over to your primary interior defender. And I think he does a good job giving up 7 inches to Hunter Dickinson. I think I think his body language, I think the way he's able to get calls, especially as a junior, the way he's able to work refs, and just his skill set, the things he's able to do out on the court. I mean, he's one of the 10 best players, and had one of the 10 best seasons for me, hands down, in the DMV.
Well,
okay.
Gosh. Well,
Did you want to chime in?
Absolutely, G, because you're rough, man. If Trevor Kills doesn't make your list, man, you think you take Giannis on your squad, man?
Take who?
Take who? You think you take Giannis on your squad? If you don't take Trevor on your team, I don't know if Trey Young makes your all met list here this year.
Well, here's my thing, though. So if we take Trevor, we take Jeremy too, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me say this about first about Trevor. Okay. First of all, the first part of the season, particularly right out of the box, and you guys know that I watch games all around the country, and I go and call games around the country as a color analyst. And so I saw everybody who's supposed to be good this year up close and personal. And let me tell you something. There was nobody in the country in December that was playing better as a unit than Paul VI. You guys were both over at the Matha for Keith's tournament. There was nobody in that gym that could touch the way that they were already in midseason form, the way they were sharing the ball, pushing it up. Trevor is a key part of that. Mark mentioned, all the things he does for them. Well, he both ends of the floor. This kid shot the lights out this year. He made as big a shot as anybody's ever made this season. I only saw him play poorly once. And I won't even say that's poorly. It just wasn't up to Trevor Kill's standards. And that was in the last game over here at the hold on. Okay. That was at the last game over at in the championships. And is the only time I hadn't seen him play to a super, super high level. This kid was lights out all year. He could get to the basket. He was playing at all three levels. It was amazing. It was a huge jump from last year. And again, here I am mentioning what people did last year, but Trevor Kills was absolutely dominant. Now I'll let you guys talk about Roach, because I also had Roach on my.
You said you don't?
No, I said I'll let you guys talk about Roach. I will. He's also on my team. I do have him. I have both of them.
All right.
Yes.
All right. So I didn't have Trevor Kills, so they didn't win the regular season. They didn't win the conference, and I think that his and Jeremy's production is so close that you can only have one. And if you're telling me that Trevor Kills had the most impact, especially early, because I know Jeremy had some games, especially in losses locally, that weren't his best efforts, right? But then he also came back. He had a McDonald's moment against Gonzaga in the playoffs. So if you pick both right now, we're 5 people from the WCAC.
Well, that's
unanimous.
You know what? That's okay if you've got 5 all Metters
I think
from the
5,
WCAC.
I think 5 from the 5 from the WCAC is fine. They've done 5 before a handful of times.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. You have 2 coming from the same team. You have 2 coming from the same team. You have 2 coming from a team that won. Mm-hmm. Then you have 2 coming from a team that lost.
Well, gee, these are pretty good teams, man. I mean, if you
they're great teams, great players.
Look, if you finish the goal in the WCAC, and you can talk to any of the coaches about it, is to finish in the top 5.
Mm-hmm.
Now that might be a what some people might consider.
I think it depends. I think it depends which coach you ask. I don't think DeMatha and PBI's goals are to finish in the top 5.
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, but it's something that coach can live with. He's not going to lose. He's not going to lose his job if he finishes in the top 4 or 5 of the.
He's not going to lose his job, but if Mike Jones or Glenn Farrello doesn't have a top 4 seed in the WCAC, tournament, I think is going to be considered a colossal failure of a season unless they bounce back and win it.
I think what you're going to have is, you're going to have something that that had to happen. Right. An injury or something along those lines. But I mean, that happens. I mean, look what happened. Probably last year, I think I think that PBI had the best backcourt in the country that never got a chance to really suit up together. With both Ant Harris and Jeremy. And they had a great year,
right?
Despite that, guys filled in. They weren't Ant Harris, they weren't Jeremy, but they put together a good season. So again, we're talking. What I keep hearing is I hear that we're talking, really from that spoiled vantage point, that we just used to watching super high level, basketball.
If I can also
Go ahead.
Yeah, if I can chime in on one more thing. So yes, they did not win the WCAC championship, but there's a lot more high level basketball to be played, and that's why it's kind of early for us to make these predictions. But they could still win Alhambra. They could still win the Virginia finals this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's still a lot of postseason basketball that hasn't been played yet.
Right. Well, the Virginia Independent high school thing is not, the equivalent of the WCAC, or even I think even the Maryland state playoffs. It's not even close, Mark, in terms of competitiveness. Alhambra has always been sort of a celebration tournament, if you will, end of the season reward kind of a tournament. That if you could win that and pick up, a lot of times it gives guys an opportunity to get back if you've lost to DeMatha, chance to get them, up there. So it's a little different.
By no means am I saying that it's on that level, but it's like there's still chances for kids to prove themselves. And
sure,
if it's between Keels, Leggett, and Terrence Williams, like one of these guys could rise to the top or one of these guys could fade to the bottom. And to be honest with you, one of the reasons I did not select Leggett was St. John's loss to Coolidge the other night. Like Leggett was on the bubble for me, and they lost a game where they were a massive favorite, and they're not going to have a chance to go win a DC state championship or even play in a DC semifinal today at Georgetown. And that for me was that was
I think we're only getting to the point now where, and I'll just mention this real quickly. I think we're only getting to the point now, for example, that the DC state championship was literally forced on the teams in DC, the private schools, who at that juncture, really kind of want their seasons to be over, or they want to just go to Alhambra in the case of St. John's or Gonzaga. But they were forced. They were told that they, they wouldn't be able to be certified to play in out-of-state games if they didn't play and participate in this thing. So I know the first 2 years there was a lot of hemming and hawing between, those schools not really wanting to play in this thing.
But are you saying
for them? So
saying that down to the players and their effort?
Well, I think it came from top of the school. So it was just kind of like, okay, we're just gonna go play in this thing. I think it's a little different now. I think the bragging rights piece is starting to kick in for the individual players. But that was not that wasn't anything that was kind of like a rites of passage, or it's like, hey, man, I can't wait to play Wilson, or I can't wait to play, Murray. That just was not happening. So anyway, that's just my little kick in inside information there. But that's a good point, Mark. If somebody was right on the bubble, and they lost. Now Coolidge, by the way, ended up being pretty damn good this year. And I know I only saw them once.
Yeah, they were pretty good, but
Mm-hmm.
look, a team that didn't make the DCI AA final beat a team that was nationally ranked for more than 50% of the season. Like, being good and then beating St. John's are on two totally different planes.
Well, we're I've said it before. We're in the DMV. We're here. We're spoiled.
I kind of want to just
go ahead.
I want to go back. I want to get your opinion on something.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we have Keels and Roach are both unanimous selections. We have 5 players from the WCAC. But if you only had to pick one between Roach and Keels, who would you pick for this particular season?
Oh.
Because the WCAC didn't split the MVP vote this year. They had 3 last year.
Right. And
this year, you're telling me Trevor's playing at a super high level. Roach is a McDonald's All-American. He played at a super high level as well. So the WCAC didn't feel that way. They gave it to one player in this particular season. But if you had to pick between Roach and Keels this season, who would you pick?
For me, I probably would say the Trevor Keels.
Me too. Me too.
Okay.
But look, okay. I don't want you to put me in that box
position.
Yeah, because right. Because both of them had a great year. So
no, that's fine. We'll leave it there. So are we done with the WCAC, or is there anyone else that may have been on the bubble for you?
Yeah, I've got about 12 more players from the WCAC. No, I'm joking. I'll tell you, on the bubble for me, and the only thing that really kind of kept him off was consistency. Bubble was the only other player in the WCAC for me was Miles Studi, and again it was some consistency issues in terms of not playing great every night. But a couple different performances, a couple different game opportunities. I thought he was right there.
I disagree, but
was he first team All WCAC?
No.
Yeah, and it's hard to make a case for him as the best player on that team. And also, they had some struggles in there locally as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Stern.
I think it took him a little while, chemistry-wise, to kind of put it together.
Yeah, it's a bubble selection, so that's fine. So, Stern, do you have anyone else on the bubble in the WCAC?
No, that's it.
That was it.
I had 5 in the WCAC. I know Dave. So you had 6 guys from the WCAC, right?
I had for me, I had Terrence Williams, Hunter Dickinson, Earl Timberlake, Ish, Jeremy, and Trevor.
Yeah.
So it was very WCAC heavy for me, but I had to just take a real hard look around. Who had the seasons though. As I looked throughout the area. So
I had 3. I had Hunter, Earl, and Jeremy.
Yeah.
So we're moving out to WCAC now. Who wants to go first?
Well, I of course had Ronald Polite, and at Oxon Hill, and additionally, I'm picking him as my player of the year.
Right.
I just thought he was. I thought he was. I've known about him. I've seen him play. He was good, but he was just absolutely outstanding this year. He was totally dominant in Prince George's County, and it's unfortunate that they did not. What would have been great is for Lou to have if he had a much better schedule this year in terms of outside, so everybody could see this kid.
Mm-hmm. I had Ronald as well, and also had him as my player of the year. Stern, do you have anything different?
I do not have him as my player of the year, but I do have him
first team.
Yeah.
Okay.
So to be honest, for me, it's too like he could play his way into Player of the Year if they were to make some serious noise in the playoffs. But as of today, I can't call him my Player of the Year.
Yeah.
But why do you feel he needs to have a state performance to solidify what he's done this entire
Because
season?
I think when it comes to all Met selections, I think which is different than every other league, like the NBA, the NFL, everything else. I think the playoffs is such a huge part of your resume. And you had even alluded to it a minute ago when you were saying that Roach did that, that Keels didn't win anything. He didn't win the championship or the regular season.
Right.
So
But Polite won the championship. They beat ER just last week or this week.
PG County championship.
That's
for
the
bragging,
PG County championship.
For bragging.
Right.
For bragging
I don't even know why they still even have those games.
That game doesn't mean anything. Like there is no is no championship game in Montgomery County. It's a bragging rights championship game.
Yeah, Anne Arundel still has that game as well.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
ER is a locally ranked team. He beat. He also beat Potomac. So you're going to discredit his entire regular season in hopes that he has a great state run?
How am I discrediting it? He's a first-team All-Met for me based on his regular season.
Well, you just said his chip didn't count. But he can't be Player of the Year because of that chip.
That's really. Here's the thing.
That is not a true championship.
That is
a bragging rights county championship.
Now wait a minute. That's why I do agree with Mark on that. That is not the chip. The chip is what he's getting ready to play into. The chip is out there at Comcast Center.
Right, but let me ask you something. All those teams at Comcast that he may face, all of them locally. Are all those teams and players in consideration for All Met?
They're not him.
If Eleanor Roosevelt were to win a state championship, Quentin Mincy would be on my bubble. He probably still wouldn't make it, but if he had if he played amazingly in those games, then there's a chance he could make it. Yes. If Corey Dyches led Potomac to a championship, he would 100% be a first-team All-Met for me. So to answer your question, yes. Like there's so much unplayed basketball that's going to dictate where these kids fall, not only for me, but I'm pretty damn sure if Corey Dyches wins the state championship, then the Washington Post is going to have him as a first-team All-Met too.
Yeah.
Dyches
and Mincy, who you just mentioned, will probably be for that other publication, All-Metters.
Okay, so let's look at what we have. We have Ronald Polite. He's the unanimous selection. He's a unanimous Player of the Year also. So I'm going to put that beside his name, but he also is a unanimous first teamer. So who's next? I think it's on you, Mr. Dickerson.
I'm going to I'm going to put, and I know, I'm not sure if either of you guys have Quincy Allen.
Quincy Allen from Murray?
Yes.
Didn't he miss like a ton of time this year?
Yeah, he did.
And that was my only question.
And that was my only question for whether I would put him in there. But I think that even with the time missed, he's a first team All-Met kid.
So he's one of the top 10 players in the area based upon this season.
I think so.
Even though I don't even think he played. I'm pretty sure he didn't play in Murray's last game.
Yeah.
Pretty sure he didn't play in that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I didn't have Quincy. Stern, I know you didn't have Quincy because of your reaction.
No. So Dave, if my math is correct, you only have one guy left on your team, right? You've named 9.
No, I've got
no, he came prepared.
I got some bubble kids, but I also have
So you've named 9
I've
kids
got 2
on
others
your team so far, right?
I've named 8.
Oh, 8? Okay.
Yeah, 8. Well, the problem is obviously that all of them didn't go on either. So, but I got another. This kid is out. Is gonna not be on either one of your lists. But when I started looking through everybody, I didn't get maybe the consistency that I would have normally looked for. But I thought that we should. I thought that I should introduce Benny Williams at St. Andrews.
Is he a bubble guy for you, or is he actually on your list?
He's on the list.
He's on my list too.
Yeah.
Benny, I had Benny as well. I don't think they actually have a MAC player of the year, but I think he is the best player right now, healthy in that league, in that conference.
Mm-hmm.
He has the championship. At one point, he was averaging a double-double, and even after
they asked him to do a lot of things.
And even after Colin went down,
mm-hmm.
even after Colin, the point guard, went down, Colin Small,
right?
They still won the chip,
right? And
he's all conference in there also.
And I think that's the thing with him too, is that I think that he had to play a couple different positions. They asked him to do a lot of stuff. They asked him to rebound. They asked him to block shots or to try to change shots. They asked him to do a little bit of everything. And so you won't of numbers. You won't see the 40-point games because he's doing so many other things, doing some ball handling as well, and starting the offense. But I think Benny is the business, this for me was just a standout season for him.
Yeah, I have Benny Williams as well, and the other thing I wanted to mention about him, it's skipping me right now, but go ahead, Stern. Did you have anything about Williams?
I did not have him on my team. I mean, he had a great year. He's got an even better future ahead of him compared to this year. I think next year, I mean, I don't know about being a player of the year candidate, but I think he's got a very bright future. I don't have him on the team this year, though.
Okay. No problem. So right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 7 players listed, and it's on you, Stern.
I've got Jawatuka from Gaithersburg.
Yeah, I had him. He was on my bubble, but I love him though.
So he was on my bubble as well. I had Jomo going, Atuka, Mo Johnson, and Savion Jackson, all on my bubble. A lot of production. Can kind of argue who had the best overall season as far as team. And then impact, they each have huge impact on their team. So all 4 of them were on my bubble. So did you have Atuka on your list as well, Mr. Dickerson?
He was bubble for me.
He was bubble.
Yeah.
Okay.
Love him.
Yeah.
I just was, when you're talking, you give him that top 10 task. It's and you really need 16 spots, but you only have 10. So he was on my bubble. Yeah. He's certainly under consideration. He'll be first team,
but I think
for sure.
I think with him being on both of our bubbles and 1 vote from Stern, I think that pretty much puts him on the list to me. Because I mean,
well, we're probably gonna
put him on the secondary. Put him on your secondary list.
Yeah, I mean,
if we put him on the bubble list.
If 1 vote and 2 bubbles puts him on the list, we're gonna end up with more than 10 people on the list.
Yeah. So I think you probably you hold them off until the final, then you can come back.
Until it's done. Okay, got you. I put an asterisk beside him. So who's next?
Ja'Kai Robinson
from National Christian. Question: is he the best player on that team right now?
Yes. Yuri Covington has blown up since he got there. But I think Ja'Kai Robinson can do a lot of things that Covington can't do, and they can lean on him to do anything, whether it's play defense, rebound, guard interior players. I mean, he does everything. I mean, Covington has come out of nowhere and had a hell of a year, and probably deserves something better than honorable mention. But I mean, for me, I've got Robinson.
Okay. Did you have Ja'Kai, Mr. Dickerson?
I did not, but Covington was on my bubble. And I like both of those kids. Don't get me wrong. I like both of them, but I just thought Covington had the monster year. And then I'm a big Trevor fan because from a coaching perspective, I think that he just has not gotten some of the attention that he should have as a coach. He actually is probably one of the best in-game adjustment guys that we have in our area. He's really able to assess how his kids are playing and make changes, whether it's actually in the game or come out of halftime. He serves those kids well from the bench perspective. But no, Covington was kind of was my bubble guy there. But I didn't have either. None of them kind of made that top 10 cut for me.
Okay, I didn't have Ja'Kai Robinson on the list because of the addition of Covington.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but that's a good choice though, Mark, because I really, I looked at that, but I didn't entertain that long. So,
I'll throw one out. Durham Buchanan from Wilson.
Got him on mine.
Mr. Dickerson? Bubble guy? You want to give your thoughts behind the bubble? DCIAA Player of the Year as a sophomore?
Yeah, that part I like, but I like, I also love, the Hansberry story, Armani, as a freshman. But I think that I just didn't think that I thought there was a huge drop off with the team this year.
Well, they lost 4 Division I players.
Exactly, and that's why I didn't. And also DCIAA from a competition perspective, what was there, 2 teams maybe that they really, had to.
Coolidge is going to be mad at you.
I know.
They just beat
I know. It was really. Yeah, but I mean, you really only had, Coolidge, Wilson, and Roosevelt.
Okay.
So, I don't know. There's an argument sometimes that there's a lot of people that will argue with you that the Charter League, was tougher from a competition perspective. So, I'll leave that where that is, and that changes from year to year. So, very cyclical.
Mm-hmm. So you had Buchanan and Stern, and what was your reasoning?
I mean, I thought he was the best player in the DCIAA. I think he could easily be playing in one of these prestigious private leagues and making a major impact. I mean, he was. I thought he was.
Not gonna be mad at you.
What's that?
He'll be mad at you now.
I mean, I thought he was a tremendous player on a team that was not a clear-cut team to win that division, and he rose to the top when it mattered the most.
Yeah.
I think, Wilson lost all these guys, and, probably Roosevelt with that 34-1 record or whatever it was the favorite coming in, and he had to put his team on his back and will them to victory.
No problem. But I agree with you. He's the best prospect in the conference, and he did a team that lost so much. He still put them in contention to play in the championship game. He did not win it.
Right. Yeah, my
impact and production. Yeah. He still should make this list. But I'm sorry, Mr. Dickerson. Please continue.
Oh no, I was just going to say he's just another example of one of the really great players. We're going to probably see him have a lot of impact when he leaves. At the next level is probably what we're going to see. We'll see how really good he is. Now love him, but everybody can't make the list. You gave us strict rules, man.
Well, he makes it because we, Stern and I both voted him in. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, I'm sorry. We have 8 players right now. So I think it's on you, Mr. Dickerson.
Well, and so my last player would be really the only kid from the Virginia side. There were a couple that I liked and I thought were bubble, but I'm going to, and I know no one else is probably hasn't, but I'm gonna say Darius Johnson from Episcopal High School.
Yeah, I didn't have Darius Johnson.
I didn't have Darius Johnson either. He had a great year, and I could see him being on one of the teams, but I can't see him being a first team All Met.
Yeah, he didn't make my list. Unfortunately, I agree. He had a great statistical year as well, and they are in the post top 20 as well. They've been for most of the year.
He had a fantastic year. He broke out. He's always been the athlete. I think that his athleticism, started to peak. He was out of his brother's shadow for the first time in the last 3 years, and he is just a beast, man. I think you're gonna see a lot of good things for him out on the circuit this summer, and then of course he'll be back next year for he's a junior. He's a 21 kid, so he'll be back, and you'll see some more out of him. But I thought I had to throw his name in the mix.
Got it. So, Stern, it's on you. I guess you and I have to finish up. Mr. Dickerson shot his shot for everybody.
So I have one pick left. I mean, I'm so torn on this last pick. Oh my gracious. So
I know it's in Montgomery County.
No, definitely. Can I tell you who I'm torn between?
Sure.
I'm torn between Corey Dyches from Potomac, Delani Hunt from Rock Creek, and either Screen or Lipscomb from St. Stephen St. Agnes. And
so you have Dyches, and he had a huge statistical season, and also Potomac in the post top 20 as well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. They have 2 losses. They only have 2 losses all year long, both to Oxon Hill. I mean, I saw Dyches twice this year, and he is phenomenal. And to think that basketball is not his first sport is scary. I don't know if you can give 2 kids to PG, and if I did this,
I don't know why you couldn't. Why can't you? No geographical restrictions, and you really shouldn't pick your guy. Don't pick these guys based on, well, do I have enough representation here or there?
I guess I would go with Dyches then. I mean, just from seeing him play, the impact he has on his team. I mean, he's still a little bit raw basketball wise, but his athleticism is. I mean, I can't think of many players I've ever seen play basketball in this area with his athleticism, and that says a lot. And he just
that is saying a lot.
And he is a freak athlete, and he was the man on Potomac. I mean, he was co-player of the year with Ronald Polite, who the two of you have as your player of the year. So I guess I put Dyches on there.
Okay, so Dyches. For me, I have Tremaine Chesley of St. Charles.
Yeah.
Okay.
They had a great season. They won the SMAC, first time ever in school history. The head coach hasn't been there for so long himself.
Well, you got to remember that's a new school. This is like the 3rd year, man.
Yeah, I think it's the 5th.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And unfortunately, what's happened down there is those schools are literally walking distance from each other. Thomas Stone, North Point, Westlake. I mean, every time that a school opens, and St. Charles opened 3 years ago, they steal kids from, you got kids that live across the street from each other that are going to another school. And so, because Thomas Stone, used to have the lay of the land down there, and they opened up North Point, and everybody goes to North Point. Well, actually, they opened Westlake first, and so anyway, they cannibalized themselves. I like the Chesley kid. I don't think that they're in terms of the level of competition down there. I just don't think it's close to what some of the players that we have been talking about have been playing against. So that's just my
I mean,
thought.
the reason I don't know if Chesley is the best candidate from his team to be on this. I mean,
right, and that argument could be made for Max Brooks as well.
Mm-hmm.
But when we talk about impact on the game, it's been said that Chesley is the best defender. His stats may not be the same as Brooks, but his impact on the game defensively, his stats aren't too far off. And then on top of that, they have the winning as well. So you kind of you throw it up in the air, you pick one. Me personally, I'm going to go with the one who's, spoken about defensively, because we know what type of impact that could have if he's checking the best player on the other team.
Yeah, fair enough. And this also goes for me back to the point where, look, Dyches
play. There's no question.
Dyches could have to play against Chesley in the playoffs. I mean, they're in the same, not only in the same region, but the same section of that region. So, like, how do you, for me, like, if they play each other, how do you not pick the winner of that game if they're so neck and neck? I mean, that's why the playoffs mean so much for me, especially if these kids are going to go heads up. If they're right on that bubble together, like, unless one kid has a huge game and his team loses, which is possible. But I think the playoffs are such an important part of every player's resume.
Got it. But I don't know if the Post will pick two public school PG County players. I just don't see that.
That was what I said right before I picked Dyches.
I don't think
they will.
Yeah.
And then
on top of that, they split the MVP. So I don't necessarily see that happen. I think Corey is a great player, and he's really, come a long way as far as his skills. He actually made some threes. Jump shooting wasn't always his thing, more so just relying on his athleticism and defense, but he's making some threes now. So
I think that'll boil down to when they're choosing, they like to try to do, distribution scenario, where they do, there's somebody from Virginia,
like there's a Virginia public kid every year on that team. And
and then most of their reporters, Mark, are actually live on the Virginia side. And so it's easy for them to, when they get game assignments, it's easier for them to cover games.
Well, I'm not sure about that, because every reporter has, one guy has the WCAC, one guy has MoCo, one guy has PG. So I'm not sure if reporting is Virginia bias.
Yeah, but
each reporter is assigned a league.
Well, and then there's okay, I'm gonna let you that. Actually, I'll let that go. I could say something else, but I'm gonna let that go. But you're right on that.
All right. So the last choice I have was Isaiah Folk of Middleburg Academy. Was he on the bubble for anybody?
Nope. I know of him, and he can play. But it's kind of, in some respects, they're kind of almost not in the area. It's like some of the guys that are up in Frederick are kind of almost really not in the area. They're in the area, but they're not in the area.
Well, I think the difference is, the Washington Post does not cover Frederick teams, whereas the Washington Post covers Middleburg.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They're in the top 20. They played local teams, and they actually, St. Charles is, I think they have the only loss. They gave St. Charles the only loss this year, if I'm not mistaken. And Jaden House on his team, great scorer, does a lot of things as well. But I think Isaiah Folks, his rebounding, his leadership, his scoring as well, that overall impact on the team could kind of push him possibly to first team. But we'll see.
Yeah,
it's going to be interesting.
Again, he's a kid that obviously we're probably going to see more from when he leaves. He's going to make a big impact, and just because of the nature of the area we're in and the schools that the usual suspects in our area. We're going to find out a little bit more about him when he goes off to college.
Okay. Stern, player of the year for
My
you?
player of the year is Earl Timberlake.
Oh, wow.
I think
Thought process
that's
behind
not a bad choice.
I think Timberlake was – so I think DeMath is the number one team in the area by far. And to be honest, I don't think Timberlake will win it because I don't think DeMath guy is going to win it 2 years in a row with Justin Moore winning it last year. But for me, DeMath was the best team in the area by a lot. And DeMath wasn't – coming into the season, I didn't think DeMath would be the best team in the WCAC. I mean, they have these two star players, but I think they really – really went over expectation, and that says a lot.
Let me say this to you. Let's say Mike Jones. Let's talk about Mike Jones because I saw those guys in preseason. I saw those guys at the beginning of the year. And I thought that Mike was going to have his toughest year in a decade. That's how good they did.
He had one really tough year 5 years ago where DeMath was.
No, I'm saying I thought he was going to have his toughest year in a decade, in a whole decade. That's how poorly they looked at the beginning of the season. So I'm saying Mike Jones because Mike Jones just did, I think, an unbelievable job with these guys. He took a hard look at what he had, and he adjusted their style of play. To that, you see that he also, Mike probably, have we seen the DeMath team play this many guys on a regular basis?
No.
That Mike did this year. Mike did a great job shuffling kids in and out, found out who could help them in certain areas and who couldn't, and made the adjustments on the fly. That's why he's my coach of the year candidate because, again, it looked like it did not look good. We saw them catch a 50-piece at the beginning of the year on national television on ESPN. It really looked like this was not going to be great for him. So anyway, my hat's off to the kids and to Mike and his coaching staff, Reggie, Beanie, and those guys did a great job with that group this year.
Timberlake for player of the year. I would like to see it. I just don't know if it'll happen. Hunter won player of the year in the conference. They did win the championship in the WCAC, but
that's always a little different. You might remember that the number one draft pick and Markel Fultz did not get player of the year because the coaches in the WCAC vote, and they voted Chris Likes. Chris Likes won by 4 votes. Markel senior year.
Right. So Markel was McDonald's.
Yes.
Chris was WCAC.
Yeah, Chris missed McDonald's by 2 votes.
And Anthony Cowan was Washington Post.
Player of the year.
And BJ King. And BJ King was also McDonald's, right? But I just don't know if they'll split it between 2 teammates where one is player of the year in the conference in which they hold to such high esteem, and then give the overall player of the year in the area to his teammates.
Yeah. Look, like I said, I do not think the Washington Post will vote that way, but that is my vote. And I think Earl, first half of the year was the man. Hunter, second half of the year was the man. Earl in the playoffs kind of bounced back. Earl in the championship was downright filthy on both ends of the floor. And there's a lot of basketball left. I mean, look, DeMath can go to Dick's. Now, the all-Met voting will probably come out before Dick's, but, Earl's got a chance to go to Alhambra now. I think he's, locked in. He had a little bit of a slump, but, I don't know. I thought Earl, and I'm talking about both ways, his ability to guard 1 through 5, his ability to play, 1 through 5. If Hunter's not in the game, Earl could easily be checking the other team's best player.
Right.
Sorry, biggest player.
Yeah.
He can guard ones, he can guard
Look,
twos.
there's no question. There's a hardcore case for him to be Player of the Year.
And I think
No question.
And I think Earl is more valuable to his team than Hunter is as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that. I think Hunter may have been most outstanding, but Earl definitely most valuable.
Oh yeah,
I'd
have to go with that. He, like I said, especially if you looked at where they were at the beginning of the season, their first 5 games, you were like, man, this is not going to be, what we, we normally see from a DeMatha team. But both those guys really picked it up. Yeah, I think and did a great job. Well, I think both both you and I had mentioned as our Player of the Year, Polite, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And for me, like my Player of the Year today is Timberlake, but dependent upon what Polite does from this point forward and how his team does, like I would. It's possible I could change my vote.
Yeah.
But as of today, I would have Timberlake.
Yeah. Well, this is why we're doing this thing, guys. And remember, it's supposed to be fun. There's nobody else that has the group of kids that select from that we do. So.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. All great players.
Yep.
So we're getting ready to move towards the Coach of the Year. Just want to go back to our unanimous selections. Just a recap: Terrence Williams, Hunter Dickinson, Earl Timberlake, Trevor Keels, Jeremy Roach, Ronald Polite, Benny Williams, and Darren Buchanan. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're two spots short, but we weren't able to agree on several bubble players, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
We'll leave that up to the post.
So we're going to leave it up to us. They're going to be referring to your list.
You had Jawatuka there. You remember you said you were going to put him in if.
Right. So we can go back, but if you want to include Jawatuka, if we want to include him, that would make 9 because he was on the bubble for me. He was your pick, and he was also on the bubble for Mr. Dickerson. Excuse me. So I don't have a problem with adding him. That would be 9. But who would be that 10th player?
So let's see who our options are.
We talked about
Ish Leggett, Corey Dyches.
So you 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That Ish would be 6 from the WCAC. That's 60% of the first team all met. And if you add Corey Dyches, that would be a second from PG County.
Right. And we have other options. Dave, who are a couple of your guys that didn't make the unanimous list here?
Well, obviously you just mentioned Ish, and I talked about Darius, but
right, Darius.
I like you had mentioned Jocko, and he would be. And the thing is, all of these guys are good representation.
Nope. Are you talking about Ituka?
Yes, all of them.
Right. So we're adding him. Okay. So we're at 9 right now. So we're just looking for a 10th player.
Let me see who was the other kid in Montgomery.
I had Remember, I had Tremaine Chesley.
Yeah, Tremaine. Yeah.
Nobody kind of agreed with that one, but that's something I guess we can.
Yeah, I don't disagree with it. I just, was looking at some other kids.
Okay. Ja'Kai Robinson as well.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned. Ja'Kai. Yeah, Ja'Kai would be a good selection as well.
So Ja'Kai, he wasn't on the bubble for you, but he's on the bubble for you now as the 10th player.
Yeah, he certainly could be. And it's just,
are you
just
okay
running out of spaces, man?
Right, that's what I'm saying. So, is that your selection now?
I would. My first selection would be Ish.
Okay, Stern, going back to you.
I had Ja'Kai before. I'll have Ja'Kai now.
Yeah. I guess I'm the tiebreaker in this particular case. I have to go with. Well, I don't have to, but I think I'm gonna go with Ja'Kai Robinson from National Christian Academy.
Well, not only did you pick him, which is a great choice, but also I know you're thinking along the lines of that additional WCAC player. You know, with
that's six players from one. Yeah, six players from one conference. To me, is when my initial list only had 3, so to add an additional 3 just wouldn't sit right with me with so many great players in the area.
Right.
That and with so many winning programs too.
And that's the thing; it's going to always be a problem. Because one is, that WCAC is arguably not even arguably, the best conference in the country. The only thing that even comes close is Chicago Public School, which top to bottom is just like WCAC, except for we don't hear about Chicago Public Schools.
You fading away a little bit, Mr. Dickerson.
We don't hear a lot about the Chicago Public League kids because, their school system is not known to be great, and a lot of the kids disappear in the mix when it comes times for grades and SATs and that kind of stuff. But it's just as competitive as what you see night in night out, in the WCAC.
Got it. So we're going to move on to Coach of the Year. I know you mentioned Coach Jones from DeMatha. Is he your first selection for Coach of the Year?
Yeah, he's my first selection. And then I have my second guy, my runner-up, would be Lewis Howard over at Oxon Hill. Lou's been a couple different places now. He's very successful at Largo, and where else has he been? He's been a few he's had a few stops on the Prince George's County side, most successfully over at Largo, but he kind of faded or disappeared off the scene, and this year he really put that group together, and we've all raved about how how well Polite played, but that team has been excellent this year. So
I have a question. For the Coach of the Year, his team's performance in the states, would that
absolutely
matter? Okay,
yeah,
so it's not based on
it still doesn't. It wouldn't. It still wouldn't knock out. I was giving him a nod this year, but it still wouldn't knock out Mike Jones. Mike Jones is my Coach of the Year selection.
So would Coach Jones receive it just strictly off the WCAC play, winning the championship, and also having one loss in the conference?
No.
Or does he have to now
the full
win
season, the out of conference games, the travel games, the way that team was completely fundamentally different at the end of the season than it was at the beginning of the season. That was coaching, brother. Some years he's been, some of the coaches like Steve Turner and Glenn Ferrello, just quite honestly, some years they've been lucky, but based on the personnel. Other years, you really have to earn your keep. I used to tease Mike about the fact that he had Victor. Obviously Victor averaged about maybe 8 points a game. Oladipo as a senior. Nobody saw Markel Fultz coming. I used to watch Markel, and Mark, you can appreciate this. Markel played in middle school with my nephew, Justin Carter, and Justin was the star of that team. Justin averaged 28 on that team. Markel, not so much. So
crazy.
I say all that to say that sometimes you you may be sitting there with some pros, potential pros on your roster, and other times you are not. And I just Everybody knows Mike. I mean, Mike's USA coach. Mike has obviously been coach of the year before, and he's at this, most storied high school program in the country. But he had his work cut out for him this year. And so I think you have to take your hat off to him. Give him his props.
Got it. So, Stern?
This is such a hard choice. I mean, I could honestly sit here and make an all-Met team of coaches of the year the same way we just did players. I mean, I've got 8 to 10 guys who I think are very, very deserving. For me,
let me get your top 2.
For me, my coach of the year is the other Mike Jones at St. Stephen St. Agnes. I think he has a collection of players that are very good players, but he doesn't have any like Power 5 dogs on his team. And he has his team hanging around with all the teams with the Power 5 dogs on them. I mean, yes, they lost to Gonzaga this year. They lost to DeMatha this year, close games, even though they beat DeMatha a few times the summer before. But his team is right there in the conversation with them. And what he's able to do with like 4, mid-major D1 guys on his team, I think the job that he's done, the culture he's created there is like amazing. And he's my
I'd agree. He did a great job. I think he probably did. If we were counting, though, I think he did a better job last year.
Yeah. I agree. But he backed it up this year, even after Charles Thompson left. I mean, the team was probably a little better this year, but to be able to back it up again this year, to get a better schedule this year, I do think that the coach of the year, maybe at least when the Washington Post does it, maybe sometimes it is not just your resume for that year. There's a legacy, there's a body of work, like there's more to it than that.
Whether you earned it or not, over the years. Yep.
And if you've had a great 2 or 3 year run, but one of those 2 years, another coach had a perfect season or something, like I think there's maybe a little more to it than that. But for my guy, Mike Jones, St. Stephen, St. Agnes, I think the culture he's created down there is amazing, and I take my hat off to him. But like I said, there's other guys. Mike Jones at DeMatha, I mean, they exceeded expectations. He did an amazing job, and he deviated from what he usually does, like playing all these guys on his team.
I'm telling you, man, that
he's got such a hard job. I mean, that
he probably lost as much sleep as any coach in the area this year, with what he was doing from a personnel perspective, and that's why I gave the nod to him. But you're right. I mean, there's a lot of guys, and it's the usual suspects.
Yeah, I mean, I think Rob
Nickens
needs to be mentioned right now as well. I mean, what he was able.
Rob Nickens was my selection.
So Rob Nickens for me is probably my number 2, although Mike Jones, DeMatha could be my number 2. I think the St. Charles coach needs to be mentioned. We mentioned Lou Howard.
He was my number 2. The St. Charles coach is my number 2. I think he'll be the post selection. That's just my belief.
Yeah.
But going back to Rob Nickens, not ranked to start the season. If you look at his personnel, when you talk about St. Stephen's, where Coach Jones has made a program of not necessarily Power 5 guys, Rob is probably working with even less. No discredit to the kids or their talent, but what he's done, he's back in the chip game. He wins the chip. Coolidge and Wilson both ranked ahead of Roosevelt this year in the Washington Post.
Right.
And he still pulled out the W for the chip game. And he's been to the chip game however many times in the last decade.
Well,
despite this magical run, despite the loss in the state to Carroll, to me doesn't discredit what he's done this entire season with. Because if I ask you right now to name Roosevelt's starting 5, I don't know if either one of us could do it. But we can name kids from DeMatha, certainly. We can name kids from St. Stephen's. We can even name kids from St. Charles.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what he's done this particular year, in my opinion, is something that should be rewarded. And no discredit to Coach Jones, but it's a little bit different in coaching Earl Timberlake, Hunter Dickerson, Paul Smith, Tyrell Ward, transferring Jordan Hawkins, Little E. Those players and that accumulation of talent, even though they play in that conference, is a little bit different than putting together a team and winning your conference or going undefeated in your conference and then winning the championship.
Yeah. Well, Rob's done a great job over the years. At Roosevelt, one of the problems with maybe him getting the nod is the fact that Rob at every opportunity has told people that he is the best coach in the world, and that and in fact his social media handles have have championship as his middle name. Yeah, no, pictures of his
got the ring.
It's like Rob Championship Nickens or whatever his social whatever his tag is. But no, he's done a great job over the years, and actually he's had some pretty good players over the years too. He's had some kids over the last couple of years that Darius Miles was there, and
even before that, going back to like Jabril Faulkner, Johnny Schuler. I mean, he's had
all and recently, it was Darius and Marcus.
Yeah,
Dockery were on the squad there. So, in fact, they would have been seniors this year. So no, he's done a great job over the years. He's committed. He certainly would be on my list of candidates for this year. Don't you talked a little bit about you talked about National Christian, and Trevor's always on my list because it doesn't matter who Trevor has in the building. Trevor has that; those teams are competitive. You are not going to walk into National Christian, or they're not going to come out to your place, and you're not going to get a game. You are going to get a game from his kids. And it doesn't matter whether he's loaded to the hilt or, whether he just has one or two pieces. So there's a lot of guys that fall into that category. Steve Turner, you're always going to get a guy who can make in-game adjustments. Glenn Farrello, out at the other Roosevelt. You look at the consistency that Brandon's had over the years. So lots of good candidates. So G, did you were going with St. Charles?
No.
Okay.
No, Rob Nickens.
Oh, you going Rob? Okay,
Nickens,
I'm
St.
sorry.
Charles.
Okay, all right.
The St. Charles coach will be my second pick, but okay. I think he will be the post pick. Just my opinion.
Okay.
But
they've gotten a lot of publicity this year.
Has Nickens won it before? Nickens won it before?
Not to my knowledge.
If Nickens has not won it before, I think Nickens could win it this year with the post. I really do.
Well, if you think about the coverage, though, G is probably right in that. St. Charles got a lot of bylines this year.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. They did. It's definitely going to be one of those two. But yeah, we'll see.
Let me ask you guys a question, though. So national rankings come out, and I think DeMatha was in the top 10. They win the conference. They have a great season. Do you think that should impact his ability to be coach of the year locally when we most people predicted that they would be the top team in our area?
I think we should. I think it should just be if you're talking about us making a choice, if you're talking about the Washington Post making a choice, it shouldn't be based on anything national.
Well, I mean the Post, if not us necessarily, but the Post.
Well, I think with the Post that they probably are just going to base it on local, and because Mike has won it before, as we talked about, there's a very chance they probably won't pick him. Because because he is the usual suspect and he's always there. It's kind of like saying, hey, man, Bill Belichick is coach of the year. Well, okay, he probably is, but they're gonna look at one of the other franchises.
Got it.